That was a riveting film with a strong message. Soulmates, don't go far. Coming up, we'll be talking with the filmmaker of Corey right after the break. Welcome back, Soulmates. We just watched the short film Corey, an emotional story about victims of drug abuse. Here to discuss the film is lead actor, writer, director, and producer Stephen St. Pierre. Hey there, Stephen.
What's going on, Miss Fox?
Hey, you going on, you going on. Thank you for joining us on Fox Soul Screening Room. Stephen, this film, it's very compelling. What influenced you to create a story about victims of drug abuse?
Late 80s, early 90s, when crack kind of hit the streets here in like Queens and Brooklyn, where I'm from, just seeing how some of the parents of like the kids I knew, like of my friends, right? They were like just
Yeah.
functioning citizens of society at basketball games, cheering on their sons and daughters, to now fast forward seeing some of the parents in the streets begging me as a little 9-year-old kid for money. So I thought that was, a little bit just interesting seeing that as a child. And I started to think as I grew a little older, like, how are the parents at home and like my friend doing now that their mother or father's in the streets and not in the home? So that just made me start to just kind of think about all that. And then fast forward, I had a close friend of mine where I saw it firsthand, where her uncle was a victim of drug abuse, and how he would be in and out of the home, and how her grandmother, which is, his mother, would just go through these cycles of emotions. It went from sadness to despair to confusion to anger and resentment. So I just saw that all happen in just a span of a year, how, they treated him. And it just always kind of stuck in my mind from then. So now fast forward to when I became a storyteller and I was thinking about what's going to be the first story I tell, these images that I just spoke of came crashing back into my mind one night. And I said, that's it. I got to write about that.
Actress Chantal Maurice plays Corey's drug addicted wife, and we know her well as she shared her film Lorene's Got a Boogie on a recent episode of Fox Soul Screening Room. Tell us, what was it like working with Chantal?
Chantal, oh my gosh, she was amazing. I hadn't known her prior, and just through the audition process, she came in, and I looked at my producer after she left the room, and I was like, I don't think we need to see anybody else. Like, she killed it. We did it where we read opposite behind the table. That's said, you know what? I want to get in there with her because I'm an actor. So I want to feel what it would feel like with her in that moment. And we just read together, and it was so impactful and emotional in that moment, as if she was my wife and she was going through this, and she made me feel that way with her. And I said, she's it.
The ending of the film was powerful and it brought the story full circle for me. What was the takeaway message of your film?
Even though your circumstances may be what they are, you can start over in your path, because he went through the same situation. And now that his life is going through with his daughter, he's trying to stop that cycle. You'll be dealt your cards, but you always have an opportunity to change your outcome, if you just kind of hold yourself accountable and be steadfast with your own life.
Drug abuse affects all families. I mean, you don't think because, it can go from those stuck in poverty to others, but it's the way that you deal with the cards that you're dealt.
Right. And, the families are essentially a victim of drug abuse as well when their loved
Absolutely.
ones, are under the addiction. It's no one's fault. It's not like they choose that in the long term. It may have been something they've kind of just fell into, but now the addiction's taken over and everyone suffers, so everyone to come out of the movie with empathy for all sides.
Stephen, you started as an actor in TV and film. What inspired you to now start working behind the camera as well?
You know well enough as an actor, you got to start to create your own opportunities. Starting off, I was trying to get in the doors, and I soon realized that you're not going to be working as much as you could unless you start kind of putting yourself in position to work. We have all the episodics here in New York, right? Law and Order, Blue Bloods, all the stuff. So I'm always going
Yes.
out for like some street guy or some thug or whatever the case may be. So I'm like, all right, even though I'm of that area, I wasn't
Yeah.
like the one doing that. I'm
Mm.
more of a compassionate person, and
Yes.
more like that kind of person. So I had to show that side to people. And as you know, when you create your own stuff, Vivica, people look at you different.
Yes.
You walk in a room with a different kind of just swag. Your chest is out. People just like you know what? It's something about that person right there. Like they got something going on. Like, let me talk to them. So that was part of the process too for me.
Stephen, as you mentioned before, you gave a great dramatic performance in your film,
Thank you.
but you also got a funny bone about you. You do. Tell us about your comedy work.
Yeah, I started doing improv at UCB. So then when I started doing that on stage, I was like, all right, let me start kind of like writing things. So I developed this 1 minute web series called Room for Rent, where I played myself and then another character as a roommate. And each episode, we have an encounter that leads me to having to get a new roommate.
Can I tell you, doing improv is no joke. I learned all about improv when I did Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
was told by the great LD Larry David what was funny and what wasn't funny. And let me tell you something out there, soulmates. When you do improv, you learn to basically be your own writer, producer, and actor and star, because you're responsible for either things working or not working. Correct, Stephen?
That is a fact. You're writing on your feet, So
Yeah.
that's why I was able to lean into sketch so easily, because I was doing improv, and you're basically, like you said, you're writing your material as you go, and it helps your listening skills and all of that,
Yeah.
So it just made me a better actor overall.
It's listening and reacting that sometimes that's when you get magical moments, when it's a reaction or something like that the audience cracks up about that wasn't written.
That's a great tip, because you'll be doing the editors, if it's TV and film, a godsend with the reactions, because you don't want to be that actor who's like dead in between lines. But if you're giving great reactions, the editor's like, yo, let's keep it on their face, because they're giving some great stuff.
I learned to be queen of reactions while I was doing Curb Your Enthusiasm, that it was like, and I didn't, yeah, exactly. So that's what another lesson we can pass on to actors, and editors as well too, that, always be involved with the story as it's coming along, because you never know what can be used, a reaction, to help fill in things and discover moments. Now, along with producing stories, you also have a consulting business. Talk about Self-Tape with St. Pierre. What's that about?
As I started getting better as an actor, I would help read with friends, and then they would start to ask my opinion and feedback on their scenes and things like that. And I started to feel like I got a knack for it. People started really kept asking me. So during the pandemic is when I kind of really ramped it up, went into business mode, started Self-Tape with St. Pierre, started off with helping audition coaching and taping, my fellow actors.
Dropping them little gems,
Yes, ma'am.
Because that's what people don't realize, that it's more than just either thinking you're good looking or knowing your lines. It's coming up, dressing the part, looking the part. My acting coach used to tell me back in the day that when you go in for an audition, make sure that you show up as close to the part, so that when you leave out of the room, like you said about Chantal, oh my God, we don't need to see anybody else. They had it,
Right. Yep.
Now, I also hear that you and Spike Lee share the same birthday. Okay. Mr. New York Knicks fan himself. Have you ever worked with Spike, or would you like to work with Spike?
That is definitely a goal of mine, is to work with him, sharing the same birthday and both being New York Knicks fans.
Oh, you a Knicks fan too? Okay.
I
know. Struggleboots.com, right?
Yeah.
Them and the Lakers are in the same boat. Trust and believe.
Yeah, I know. It's a little hard for you guys out there too.
Stephen St. Pierre, it's been a pleasure speaking with you tonight. We appreciate your film and your talent. We're wishing you much success, and we hope to see you on Fox Soul Screening Room again in the near future.
Thank you so much, Vivica, and thank you, Fox Soul.
You're welcome.